Let's talk a little bit about, the effects of the ruble, because that obviously would be a trading issue. If we do see that impact on the currency and on its ability to interact internationally, how much of an impact does that actually make domestically for Russia? And secondarily, as an annex to that question, how much of the international trade do the West really want to cut off? I mean, is SWIFT actually targeting those major banks that deal with the important commodities that the West is still buying in vast quantities, like the soft commodities, like the oil, like the gas?
Well, so let's take that second question first. There was a hesitancy, not only in Europe, but also in Washington, about going down the route of SWIFT, because it's a blunt instrument. And as you suggest, you're either in SWIFT or you're out if you're a financial institution. And it doesn't actually impact the underlying transaction. It just means the financial messaging, which is what SWIFT is all about, is harder, more cumbersome, and it's just not an effective tool. It can be binary in making life difficult or not, but it's not as effective as some of the sanctions that the U.S. and the EU put on Russian banks last week anyway. But there was this political pressure that it was seen as SWIFT was proxy for, are you going to help us in Ukraine? So they did it. But your question's about whether it impacts commodities. There has been a real effort, both in terms of the SWIFT sanctions, the specific bank sanctions, and even the central bank sanctions, to exclude oil and gas from those sanctions. They've been very targeted. They've been broad. They've been very effective. But for now, the political costs in Europe and in the U.S. of actually cutting off the ability for Russia to export gas and oil either to Europe directly or to the global markets has been seen as a political cost that is too great for Europe and the U.S. to want to bear. So that's why you have not seen those sanctions on the table. Doesn't mean that they're not forthcoming. There's a likelihood that this is going to escalate from here. We don't know what that's going to look like. But for now, the U.S. and the EU want to keep their political support strong at home, and that means imposing as much as they can on the other guy, and I don't want to say as little as they can on, quote, the U.S., the EU, the good guys, so to speak, in their thinking. But it does mean that they want to maximize the impact on the other guy, and that means keeping oil and gas off the table.